I'm going to pass it over to Mark, who has a question coming in over the chat line. Mark?
Yeah, Paul, thank you so much. So, Dr. Friedland, we have a chat question from the UK, actually, a guy called Wayne, who would like to know what is viral load, and can an HIV-negative person have a viral load? Pretty straightforward question, but I'm sure that if there's a long-form answer there. So what do you think of that question?
Well, I'll make it brief. It's a very good question. It's quite basic. Viral load is what we refer to as the amount of virus that we measure in the blood. And the virus is actually all through the body, but because blood is a convenient fluid to obtain, we determine how active the virus is by measuring the amount of virus in the blood. And we do that by a number of different techniques. The viral load is a sort of general term that refers to the load of virus in the blood, and that's measured in a small, tiny bit of blood, and the way that it's reported is copies, that is, virus particles per millimeter of blood.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks for that information. Dr. Friedland, let me, for the moment there, let me just pass it to Mark for a little station break.
Thank you, Paul. So we're talking with Dr. Gerald Friedland on HIV at 30, Voices from the Epidemic, revisiting AIDS doctors. You can call us in at area code 424-243-9664. We're also live on the web at blogtalkradio.com/HIV Story Project, and I'm taking questions via our chat window as well. And Paul, just to remind you, so Wayne Kerr, who had chatted in from London, also wanted to know if an HIV-negative person can have a viral load. So maybe we'll, Dr. Friedland, if you could answer the second part of his question, he'd love to know the answer to that as well.
So if the test for determining whether someone has HIV is very sensitive and very accurate. If someone is tested and is HIV negative, then they would not have a viral load because they don't have HIV infection.
Right.
The way that we term viral load is only as a way of measuring the amount of HIV infection. If you don't have HIV infection by a properly done test, then you would not have a viral load.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much. And I'll pass it back to you, Paul.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. And I believe we have another chat question coming in. Mark?
Yeah, Paul. So, it's funny, Dr. Friedland, I'm trying to moderate these chat questions which are coming in for you, and they seem a little confusing and potentially controversial, but I'm gonna try to pass one through to you in a helpful way. And it's interesting, you just talked about, this idea of have you ever seen the virus, this kind of magical concept that there's something there. And there are a couple of people on the chat window who are asking those kinds of questions. And so since I, try to encourage free speech and open dialogue, I'll try to put these through in a way that is interesting here. So this one person says, I am a journalist trying to figure out if there is a test for the actual contagious virus in the human body, unlike standard ELISA and Western blot tests that test for antibodies. It has been stated that standard tests can detect up to 80 other elements not affiliated with HIV. Can the doctor refer me to an actual virus manufacturer and where to find such a test? I mean, I'm smelling like conspiracy dialogue here, so I'm going to be cautious in even putting it through. But I am interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, there certainly are tests that are directed towards the presence of the virus. And
sure.
The earlier question relates to that, and that's the viral load. The viral load measures amount of virus, and it's a test that is directed at the virus, not at the host response. So there are ways of doing that, and we do use those in circumstances which it's important to know how much virus there is in the blood. There's no question at all that there are ways in which the virus can be identified and even seen, but not by the naked, by electron microscopy. So I'm not saying for even a moment that a virus has not been seen. That's not correct. The virus is just not seen by the naked eye. It's too small.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm personally, interested. I mean, as someone who's been living with HIV, for the last 12 years, and sort of, trust my healthcare providers that I'm getting, good information and, take my medicines and all that good stuff. I think how does it feel to you as a physician when these types of questions come up? I mean, what sort of, posture do you take? Because it's so clear that 36 million people around the world are being impacted by this disease. So how do you sort of speak to someone who, just questions even the possibility that the virus really exists? Because that seems to me, you can't sort of step outside sort of, social political discussions around, around HIV and AIDS, but then medically there's just, you can point to actual information, I would think.
Oh, there's a tremendous richness of information that's been produced in the last 30 years, and there are ways of doing that. It's not so surprising. The question that you asked, that people are still trying to understand what actually the virus is and how it infects cells and how it destroys the cells. In fact, some of those basic questions are waiting to be answered. We haven't actually tackled everything. But I think in terms of patients and how we describe that to individual patients, there's a lot of visual material that is very useful. Some of it quite technical, and some of it really presented to patients in a language that could be understood. And by language, I mean not necessarily for example, the Zulu language, but by analogy. For example, we made a film in which the virus has been characterized as a snake. Traditionally, snakes are evil and invasive creatures that most Africans would associate with bad things. The CD4 cells are soldiers. South Africa and many countries are familiar with soldiers with guns, but they're the soldiers of the body, and they protect the body from the snake. And so those are concepts that are understandable, that sort of get at the basic sort of principle that you're trying to convey without going into trying to explain biology, which is something that a very traditional Zulu-speaking non-literate person would really be able to understand. So there are ways of communicating information that can make the process more believable, that is, the infection and the disease. I think it's a very important issue because you want people to understand what's going on, and that helps actually with both prevention and treatment and their own health. Yeah, no, that's very helpful. I think, our nonprofit is called the HIV Story Project, and our initiatives are, trying to encourage, interesting and dynamic storytelling around HIV and AIDS from all perspectives, including, the perspective of doctors and healthcare providers, and that's why we partnered with Paul and Columbia University on this series of podcasts. And so I think it's just an interesting dynamic to sort of open yourself up to kind of a community of, discussion and point of view around all these different issues. And, I'm certainly by no means a medical expert. I'm a patient who also happens to be a filmmaker and a producer, so just wanting to kind of, field these sort of questions in an intelligent way. So I thank you for your visual, helping us visualize that. Right. And, your work is to convey information or feeling, right, visually by film. So your skills incorporated into trying to address this issue of how to make information acceptable and understandable to people. Right. And I guess what I'm saying is I think the media has a very, very powerful role and has had a powerful role in addressing HIV/AIDS. In many ways, better than public health authorities. We tend to be technical and boring, and media can do things that are much more creative and get to people's both intellect and feeling. Well, we're now in the final 8 minutes. Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, HIV is the cause of AIDS. That is incontrovertible. And but there are issues that we don't understand about why some people progress more rapidly than others. Some people, a small percentage, will be able to handle the virus for extraordinarily long periods of time without getting sick, while other people get sick very, very rapidly. And there are very important biologic clues in there that would be very, very important into the future in developing vaccines, for example. And, this is a new disease in human history, and it's incredible how much knowledge, information, insight, therapy has happened in such a short period of time, but there's much, much more to do.